Ever feel like your brain could use a good workout?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to give it one. We're diving into the life and philosophy of Socrates, the OG of questioning everything.
Definitely a deep dive. This is a guy who's considered the father of Western philosophy.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
Right. But here's the kicker. He never actually wrote anything down. Everything we know about him comes from other people.
It's like trying to figure out a recipe based on what your friends vaguely remember their grandmas doing.
Exactly. We're piecing together fragments from his students like Plato and rivals, trying to make sense of this enigmatic figure.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the whole mystery man of philosophy thing, can we talk about his background? His dad was a stonemason, his mom a midwife. Not exactly the usual path to philosophical greatness.
Right. You'd think he'd be more likely to inherit a chisel than a love of wisdom.
So how did he go from, like, building stuff to building ideas?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Socrates actually called himself a midwife of the mind. He saw himself as helping people give birth to their own ideas, not just handing them a finished thought.
So instead of here's a brick, it's here's a question, let's see what you build with it.
Exactly. And just like childbirth, sometimes the process of questioning can be messy, painful even, but ultimately it leads to something new and hopefully something true.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this guy was so different. But this whole midwife of the mind thing, it's a lot more interactive than just, sitting in a room writing down your big thoughts, right?
Totally. Socrates was all about dialogue, debate, really getting in there and mixing it up with people's ideas, especially with those sophists in the agora.
The what now?
The agora. Picture like the ancient Greek version of a public square, marketplace, debate hall, all rolled into one.
Yeah.
And the sophists. They were like the rock stars of rhetoric, the influencers of their day.
Okay, so Socrates' philosophical rivals.
Exactly. They were all about winning arguments, using clever wordplay and persuasion, even if it meant bending the truth.
Sounds a bit like certain corners of the internet today.
Maybe. But Socrates was having none of it. He believed in objective truth, especially when it came to morality. He wanted to know, what is the good life? And he didn't think fancy speeches were the way to find out.
So he went from battling enemies on the battlefield, he was a soldier, right, to battling bad ideas in the marketplace of ideas.
Exactly. From war hero to philosophy hero, in a way. It does make you wonder, though, how his experience in war might have shaped his approach to philosophy.
That's a good question for another time, maybe. But speaking of questions, that brings us to his claim to fame, the Socratic method. Isn't that just a fancy way of saying death by 1,000 questions?
Well, it could feel that way if you're on the receiving end. Imagine you're strolling through the agora feeling pretty confident you think you know something.
Like what courage is, for example.
Perfect example. Socrates comes along and starts asking these seemingly simple questions. What is courage? Can courage ever be reckless? Is courage always about physical strength?
And just when you think you've got an answer, bam, another question.
He'd keep dissecting your every response, exposing inconsistencies, forcing you to really confront what you thought you know.
So it wasn't about him winning the argument, it was about you kind of losing your intellectual footing.
In a way, yes.
Uh-huh.
But he saw it as a path to true knowledge. He believed that questioning everything, especially our own assumptions, was the only way to get closer to the truth.
Sounds exhausting, honestly.
It could be, but also incredibly stimulating. And remember, Socrates wasn't just interested in mental gymnastics. He believed there was a direct link between knowledge and virtue.
You mean like if you truly understood what was right, you'd actually do it?
Exactly. Ignorance for Socrates wasn't just a lack of information. It was the root of bad decisions and unethical behavior.
Wow. So basically he's saying that thinking hard about life is a moral imperative.
You could put it that way. He famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living."
Strong words. I'm guessing not everyone in ancient Athens was thrilled about having their beliefs dissected in public like that.
You're right. While some were drawn to his radical ideas, others saw him as a troublemaker, a threat to the established order. And that, unfortunately, is where our story takes a bit of a dark turn.
Okay, so from questioning everything to facing some serious consequences for it, this is where we get to Socrates' trial, right?
Right. And it's important to remember the backdrop here. Athens is still reeling from its defeat in the Peloponnesian War.
Things are tense. People are nervous. Not exactly the best time to be, challenging the status quo.
Exactly. And that's exactly what Socrates was doing, whether he meant to or not. He's accused of these two big no-nos: corrupting the youth and impiety.
Impiety. Basically not being down with the Athenian gods.
Pretty much. It was a way of saying he was disrespecting the city's values, its traditions, and this corrupting the youth charge. It's interesting, right?
Because his whole thing was that an unexamined life wasn't worth living. Kind of sounds like the opposite of corruption to me.
Right. But you have to see it from the perspective of the people who were threatened by him.
Hmm.
He was encouraging young people to question everything, including the authority of their elders, the traditions of their city.
And in a time of uncertainty, after a major war, that kind of questioning can seem really dangerous. So how did the trial actually go? Did Socrates, tone it down, play it safe?
Socrates, play it safe, not a chance. If anything, he doubled down. He used his trial as a platform to defend his philosophy, his commitment to truth-seeking, even if it meant risking his own life.
Talk about standing by your principles. So he's on trial, and he's basically putting the entire Athenian justice system on trial, too.
Pretty much. He's arguing that a life lived in pursuit of truth, even if it means challenging those in power, is the highest form of citizenship.
Bold move. So how did that go over with the jury? Did they, give him points for honesty?
Not so much. They found him guilty,
No surprise there, really.
and they sentenced him to death.
Wow. Okay, so things just got real.
They did. But even in the face of death, Socrates stayed true to himself. He was given a chance to escape, to flee Athens, but he refused.
He would rather die than go against his principles. That's intense.
He believed that to escape would be to betray the laws of Athens, even the ones he disagreed with. It was a matter of integrity, of living and dying by his philosophy.
So how did the sentence get carried out?
Socrates was sentenced to drink hemlock, a poison. And according to accounts, he drank it willingly, surrounded by his friends, engaging in philosophical discussion right up until the very end.
Wow. Talking about ideas, about life and death as you're about to die, that's a whole other level of dedication.
And what's even more striking, perhaps, are his last words. According to Plato, as he's dying, Socrates says, "Credo, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Will you remember to pay the debt?"
Wait, what? A rooster. He's worried about a rooster as he's about to die.
It's a cryptic statement that has baffled and intrigued scholars for centuries.
Mm.
What did Socrates mean by it? Was it an act of piety, a final joke, a philosophical riddle?
I gotta say, that's gonna bug me. That rooster thing, it's like he's leaving us with a philosophical riddle on his way out the door.
Right. It's the perfect Socratic mic drop. What did he mean by it? Was it like a metaphor, a joke? We're still debating that one.
Some scholars think it was just a religious thing, right? Asclepius was the god of healing. Maybe he was just tying up loose ends.
Yeah, maybe it was a final act of devotion. But others see it as more ironic, like, hey, life's a disease and death's the cure, so I owe the healer a bird.
Heavy stuff. Okay, so we've got this philosopher, right? Never wrote a word down, gets himself executed for asking too many questions, and then drops a rooster riddle with his dying breath. It's a lot.
It is a lot. But maybe that's why he's still so fascinating, you know? Socrates might not have given us all the answers, but he sure did ask the right questions.
Yeah, he totally changed the game with that whole Socratic method thing. I mean, think about it. We're still using that today. Teachers use it. Lawyers use it.
Heck, I'm pretty sure I used it on my kid this morning trying to figure out why there were cookie crumbs in the bathroom.
Right, it's everywhere. But seriously, Socrates showed us the power of asking questions, of not just accepting things at face value.
Exactly. He reminds us that real knowledge means questioning everything, even, maybe especially, our own beliefs. And that's not always easy. It can be uncomfortable, challenging.
More than a little brain workout, for sure.
Mhm.
But isn't that what this is all about? I mean, this whole deep dive idea, it's about pushing ourselves to think differently, to engage with these big questions that have been shaping thought for centuries.
Right. Socrates' legacy isn't some dusty old book on a shelf. It's about keeping that spirit of inquiry alive. It's about asking why, about digging a little deeper, even when it's tough.
And maybe, just maybe, uncovering a few truths about ourselves and the world along the way.
Exactly. So next time you're hitting a philosophical dead end, channel your inner Socrates. Ask a good question. See where it takes you. You never know what you might discover.
Words to live by. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that rooster riddle. Until next time, keep those brains working.
And keep questioning everything.